Hey everybody, Scout Crafter here again, TGIF. Thank God it's Friday. You made it through another week, and this has been a great week, huh? I mean, that clamp challenge, was that amazing? Still can't believe the quality of clamps that we received, and it's just amazing. You guys are doing a great job out there. So today, because it's Friday, I try and do something a little bit more. Now, I only got 2 days to complete this before this airs, so I'm kind of in a rush today, but I wanted to do, we all like vices. Let's see what we got today. Now, as you know, my favorite type of restorations are regular, blue-collar, everyday handyman tools, and this is a prime example of one. This came from Joe. You remember Joe. Joe is Charlie's owner and good friend of the show. Now, Joe, I told you, was finding a whole bunch of stuff from this guy that was moving by his house or whatever, and he found this in the garbage, and obviously it's missing the handle here, and it's a little rough for wear, but this is a Littleton, and it's a number 25, and these are super common. I mean, you know, you can get these anywhere for between $10 and $15, and it's a regular vise. And I want to see what we can do with this, you know, because we all like doing vices. Now, let's take a good look at what it looks like, you know. It still has some of the original green paint on it, and I do like green. These also came in red. They came in all different colors. I always liked the lettering that they had there. The Littleton Foundry has a nice video on how these were made. You could see here the little anvil section's in pretty decent shape. It looks good. It's just, you can see how much slop is in it. Look, it's not even moving. And it's got a hole here. That hole can be a little, that's a big challenge. The jaw's missing one of the screw, but I don't even know what the jaws look like. So let's take it apart and then see what we got going. And obviously, this is bent. This was frozen. I freed it up, but it's bent. Let's go see what we got. Okay, here's where you do your evaluation. We easily took the vise apart. Now you have to see how far you want to go with this. Now remember, it takes just as long to restore one of these vices as it does a Parker. So, you know, why put all this, why put $100 worth of work into a $10 vise? Always remember that. Keep that in the back of your mind. We have a couple issues here. Number one, snapped off screw in here for one of the vise jaws. Number two, you could see the ledge that the vice jaw sat on is snapped off here. That was always a poor design because of how thin that ledge is. You see that? How thin that is? That's only about, I don't even know, and it's not even, you know. These were just cheap castings, you know. They sold because they were inexpensive. The jaws are in pretty bad shape, right? Look at the jaws here, and surprisingly, the turn screw is in pretty decent shape, you know. So, except for the fact that this is a little mushroomed out and it's missing a handle. So, and of course, this is bent. So you see, there's, you know, quite a bit of work here. So, first thing first, let's start. We're going to need a base. Now, we're going to need a base to put this on, something similar to this. And, you know, like I said, it takes, when you're doing a job, the setup is always the longest part. So, we have this nice, pretty long board here. It's about 4 feet. So, what we're going to do is we're going to make a few of these. We're going to cut them at this angle here. It's about a 15-degree angle. We're going to cut these into sections. Then we're going to stain them with gun stock and get that drying, because then we can work on the vise while this is drying. Here we cut up 4 different sizes, all like I said, they're 2x8s. Just put a little angle on the end, and now we're going to stain them all together. It's just so much easier when you do a lot like this, and then you put them on the side. When you need them, you use them. Now that the boards are done, we can get to stripping down the paint from the vise. It's always a good idea to use paint stripper, because there's any kind of lead paint or anything, it just won't get into the air. Okay, now we're going to try and remove this. Before we do anything else, I'm going to try and remove this broken stud that's in here from the jaws. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to put a little center mark, just a slight center dimple in the middle of that that broken stud. Then we're going to use the center drill and enlarge that hole a little bit. Okay, you can see we put a little center hole, just a little dimple in there. And now the first thing you're going to do, this is always where it pays to have this. I've never used them before. It's a brand new set. Left-handed drill bit set. We're going to take one that's just a little bit under that, and we're going to use this to try and drill a hole into there, and hopefully it'll spin out, because you know, these are really rusted in or anything. Okay, we mounted a 1/8 inch left-handed drill bit. Now you got to remember to put your drill on reverse when you're doing this. A little drop of cutting fluid on there. Make sure that you're going in pretty straight, as straight as you can, more or less, and just slowly it'll cut. Look at this. How beautiful is that? That's textbook. That's just the way it's supposed to work. And boy, that was nice that we caught that on film, right? You would never believe. Last week it was lapping compound. This week the hero of the day is the left-handed drill bit set. This is what it looks like. Picked it up on Amazon. Well worth the money. Keep it in your bag of tricks. You never know when you need it. Now we're going to go to the wire brush. We're going to use 3 wire brushes. First the big one. That big one takes everything off. After that we'll go to the secondary wire brush that gets into some different areas. And then finally we'll go to a wire brush that is softer and will flex and get into nooks and crannies. That's the brass colored one. I like that one. Here's where we're at, post-wire brush evaluation. All the paint is off, took everything off, you know, everything's nice, just like the original castings. However, you can see some of these castings were, look at that, that's supposed to say Litco, and you could see, and over here we have a little, you know, a little inclusion or a void that was during the casting, and you can see the letters aren't so sharp. So again, look at this. This is a void here. You can see where it's sunk in. That's not good. And over here we have a dent. You see this dent here? That's got to come out. And then, of course, the lettering over here don't look bad. Again, all the paint is off. Not too much damage there. Normal peening. The regular grind marks that you always see. And, of course, this thing is where we're going to have to... How are we going to fill that in? Okay? Remember that, and that's it. Now I'm going to go upstairs, have lunch, cool down, and think about it. Okay, real quickly, we're going to take care of this little ding here. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to heat this little area up a little bit. This is a malleable steel. This is separate than this. This is cast. This will crack. This here is like a ductile iron. This will bend, so you don't have to worry about cracking it. We're going to run a little heat on here, put it on the piece of railroad track, small anvil type, you know, and we're going to bang this down just a little bit, and then we'll fix it up with a file, whatever we can. We're just going to get out that little bit of a bend there. Okay, now you can see we just used a little bit of hammer to knock that bend down a little bit here. And you see we knocked it down a little bit. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to hit it with the wire brush. But you can see we got that corner's nice and straight. This way it won't, it only goes into the vise this much, but it could have hung up on the edge. We'll just wire brush it now, get it back. Okay, now this is where it gets funny. You know, this is where you learn, and we all learn. But I'm going to show you something. I took out that, you see, I smoothed this out, got rid of that, you know, that bump that was there that I thought was kind of unusual. But check this out now. When you put the vise in here, look at this. It doesn't, it's off. You see it's cocked to the side. That little bump was put there from the factory. These forgings were so crappy from the forgery, from the foundry, that they would have to do whatever they had to do to make a vise fit. So in other words, when this went in like this and they saw that it cocked, see here, it's not lined up, it's cocked to the right. So what they did is they banged this down here, deforming it, sending it out a little bit, which would force it to the left. So that's why that was on there. So I didn't know that, because who would think that forgeries, you know, forgings would be that primitive coming out of this company. But now I'm going to have to deform that again so that it rides straight. So Isn't that something? So that was a factory deformation that I took out, but I'm going to have to put back in. Okay, I undid what I did before. I put that little bend back in there. You can see it. It's a subtle bend, but I pounded it back down. And now, when I bring the vise in and line it up, you can see that this will force it over. And you can see now it lines up. But before it didn't because of that gap. Isn't that insane? I'll tell you something. That's why when you get a Parker or you get a York or you get a Reed vise, that's why you appreciate them. Because these things were meant for, I guess, children. Okay, we're at the milling machine. Let me show you the setup here. Now, you see, this is a little precarious because we're right at the edge of this. Now, cast iron, you know, can crack and snap, but here's my idea. If I could mill a 1/2-inch hole where this hole is, and this is in a bad place because it's partly hitting the jaw. So if I could mill this down a little bit, get a clean 1/2-inch hole, then I could put a piece of 1/2-inch rod in there, and this way I'll fix it nicely, but I just don't want to chip off that corner. So I got to be very careful with how I feed it and how I you know, add pressure, down pressure to it so it don't snap that thing off. Worst comes to worst, it goes in the garbage. Okay, let's give it a shot. Okay, so here's where we're at now. I milled that hole there, that 1/2-inch hole, and then I cut a little piece of this 1/2-inch steel rod, and then I pinned it into that hole. Now the jaw goes over this, so that'll hold that, and there's no way that could come out. So now I'm just going to file it down because you could see it's a little bit proud. So we got a little bit of filing to do. That's always fun. Great Grandpa's Vise. Here we are, all filed down. It's nice and smooth, and this was the old jaws that were on here before. You can see we're going to make new ones, but you see where that hole was? It was right there because it kind of went into where the jaw was. Well, you see now when we make new jaws, it's going to be flat there, and you can see how that's going to be. It's going to be, and it won't be able to spin, to move, you know, it'll be flush against there. But we're still going to go over this with a sanding to blend everything in, but that's a good repair. And that's a threaded pin that you can hardly see now because it's all filed down. Okay, now we're making some new jaws, and we have some stock here, some steel stock. It's a little bit oversized, but that's okay because we got to file it down to the profile. Now, when you want to transfer your holes from your old jaws onto your new jaws, you're going to use what's called a transfer punch. If you don't have a set of these, keep an eye out when you go to the flea markets and stuff like that. And what they are, it's a small punch. It's a punch with a center. You see that that's a center pin in there. And what you do is you would line this up here and get a center punch that fits without any slop in this hole. You see how it's nice and snug fit? And you can see they run every 64th of an inch. So you clamp this down, get it right where you want, and then you put this here, or put it directly in the center of that hole so there's no mistake. Now here I'm over at Great Grandpa's Vise. I clamped the two bottom edges so that they're lined up and they're true and parallel. And what I'm going to do is rest it in Great Grandpa's Vise, and I'm going to put the pin punch side into this hole here, strike it with the brass hammer, and give it a nice, and make sure this is vertical. It don't have to be a heavy strike, because what's going to happen is, you'll see here, these are perfectly centered now, those holes. You can see the light's a little hard to see, but those holes are perfectly centered. Now, we're going to take this apart and use a harder, stronger punch, and make those holes a little bit deeper, and then drill them out. Here we are. We, did a little bit of prep work. And here's where I have to decide what kind of color I want. I also got to make the handle here out of this. But it's coming good. The jaws are all down where they should be. That repair looks pretty good. You can barely see it right there, right? And yeah, so now I got to figure out what color I want to go. I know there's a lot of you guys out there like, Leave it shiny, leave it bare metal. A lot of guys like bare metal, but we'll see what we're going to do. We're at the point now where we're putting in the yoke into the vise, and if you see here, look at the slop. There's a lot of, now there's always has to be a little bit of slop in vices just because that's the way they're designed, you know, to take up, but that's a little excessive here, you can see. So I want to put a piece of bushing in there, and what I like to use is something that's easily replaceable if you had to put it in again. And what I'm going to use here is a piece of PVC, polyvinyl chloride, and you know, regular PVC pipe, and this way I'll turn it down on the lathe, it'll cover this and it'll fit snugly in there. Take up some of this, you see this little play? We're going to get rid of it. The dake. Everybody's favorite. Let's show you the setup and see how we're going to straighten out that little arm. So here's the setup with the dake. We got to straighten this arm out. As you can see, it's bent. Now what we're going to do is you have to determine where most of the bend is. Most of the bend is right here. So we'll spin it around this way. We'll place that. I replaced the nose cone. Normally the nose cone that's on here is this one here. And I replaced it with a step cone. This is good. It comes with the machine. And it's good for pressing out bearings and things like that, or bushings. Now we're going to put this, we're going to put a nut on this side. And we're going to put this right here. And the pressure will come down there and straighten it out, hopefully. Okay, there we go. Looks good, huh? Okay, here's a little handle detail that I did. First of all, clean this up, right? Nice. Here's the handle we made. Both sides are identical. How this works is this slips in here like this. It's nice and polished. I made these two end caps out of aluminum, and you can see that they have a recess in it, or a counterbore that fits in there like that. And then you put a stainless steel, and the reason we use stainless steel is because zinc will react with the aluminum. Stainless steel here, and again, the reason we like the T-handles, you give it a quick spin like that, spins it in, and now you have your handles on here, nice, and you tighten this thing down, and that cap is on there, and it can be removed at any time, either one. And here's another interesting feature is, I got this from the Parker Vices. They have a little set screw here that can stop this from banging. There's nothing worse than this banging back and forth, you know, when you turn the vise. So I like to keep it in the middle. This little set screw here, it's knurled on the side. You can put this in like this, and then, you know, it stays in whatever position you want. So that's a nice little feature to put on your vise. And they usually have it here, but Parker has a little more meat than this one does. This Littlestown vise only has about 1/8 of an inch, not enough, so I put it on the side. Okay, we are finished. I have to tell you, I haven't been so excited about a reveal since I think probably the Little Giant pipe wrench. I'm really psyched for this one. A lot of work went in. Let's check it out. Now, you know my favorite part. Remember what this vise looked like before we started. And we are calling this project done. Isn't that pretty? I'll tell you one thing. You know, this is a lot more work than I figured, but I am really happy with the way this came out. It is just beautiful, isn't it? I did it in a candy apple red, and that's a base clear. It's an aluminum base coat and a clear red coat, and I left the top polished, and you know, made the handle with the ends, but I put a little brass cap here. I'll show you what that does, and everything just came out nice, didn't it? Just a beautiful vise. I mean, it's not a great vise, but this one is probably the nicest Littlestown number 25 that I know of. So let me show you how it works. How this works is basically you take your board, you know, that it's fastened to, and you clamp it onto any surface. This gives you a pretty, it's only as solid as the workbench it's on. And you could see that it's a one finger operation. It's there's no slop anymore in this bearing and bushing. It will wear in even a little better, but there's zero slop in here because of that bushing we made out of PVC. Another thing is that with this here, I made this little brass plug instead of what you saw before. Now you can see it operates like a regular handle, but if I want to keep it in the middle, let's say, I put it here, give it a twist over here, and now that'll stay there. Now the reason I made this instead of what you saw before, that other screw, is where the threaded rod meets this handle, I put a little brass plug. There's a little tiny brass plug. Let me show you. Okay, you see that little brass plug there? That little brass plug, and the reason that's there is so that it doesn't scratch. If I was to put this hardened steel threaded rod against here, it would scratch or ding or something. That's a floating plug in there. And this way, I learned that from Parker. Parker has the same thing. So this way, only the brass touches this and won't leave any scratch. Now, here's a close-up of that repair. Remember that repair we did? And you could see here, that's why we opened it up to 1/2 inch, put that little slug, and that's threaded. It's all in there, so that can't go anywhere. And it's as strong as the... probably stronger than this because this is cast and that's steel, so it looks pretty good. You wouldn't even notice it from 5 feet away. So in closing, I want to thank special thanks to Joe and Charlie for the challenge, because this really was a challenge, and I hope you enjoyed this vise restoration. Hope you have a nice day. Enjoy the weekend. Take care now. Bye bye.